The plot against America.
Kick it old school, so you can feel cool. Give it to me.
The wisdom of friends.
Baby. Yeah.
The clinic permitted Paul Manafort one 10-minute call each day. And each day, he would use it to ring his wife from Arizona, his voice often soaked in tears. Apparently he sobs daily. His daughter Andrea, then 29, texted a friend. During the spring of 2015, Manafort's life had tipped into a deep trough. A few months earlier, he had intimated to his other daughter, Jessica, that suicide was a possibility. He would be gone forever, she texted Andrea. His work, the source of the status he cherished, had taken a devastating turn. For nearly a decade, he had counted primarily on a single client, albeit an exceedingly lucrative one. He'd been the chief political strategist to the man who became the president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, with whom he developed a highly personal relationship. Manafort would swim naked with his boss outside his banya, play tennis with him at his palace. Of course, I let him win, Manafort made it known, and generally serve as an arbiter of power in a vast country. One of his deputies, Rick Gates, once boasted to a group of Washington lobbyists, "You have to understand, we've been working in Ukraine a long time, and Paul has a whole separate shadow government structure, and in every ministry, he has a guy. Only a small handful of Americans' oil executives, Cold War spy masters could claim to have ever amassed such influence in a foreign regime." The power had helped fill Manafort's bank accounts. According to his recent indictment, he had tens of millions of dollars stashed in havens like Cyprus and the Grenadines. Manafort had profited from the sort of excesses that make a country ripe for revolution. And in the early months of 2014, protesters gathered on the Maidan, Kiev's Independence Square, and swept his patron from power. Fearing for his life, Yanukovych sought protective shelter in Russia. Manafort avoided any harm by keeping a careful distance from the inflamed city. But in his Kiev office, he'd left behind a safe filled with papers that he would not have wanted to fall into public view or the wrong hands. Money, which had always flowed freely to Manafort and which he'd spent more freely still, soon became a problem. After the revolution, Manafort caged some business from former minions of the ousted president, the ones who hadn't needed to run for their lives. But he complained about unpaid bills and, at age 66, scoured the world, Hungary, Uganda, Kenya, for fresh clients, hustling without any apparent luck. Andrea noted her father's tight cash flow state, texting Jessica, "He is suddenly extremely cheap." His change in spending habits was dampening her wedding plans. For her wedding weekend kick-off party, he suggested scaling back the menu to hot dogs and eliminated a line item for ice. He seemed unwilling, or perhaps unable, to access his offshore accounts. An FBI investigation scrutinizing his work in Ukraine had begun not long after Yanukovych's fall. Meanwhile, a Russian oligarch named Oleg Deripaska had been after Manafort to explain what had happened to an $18.9 million investment in a Ukrainian company that Manafort had claimed to have made on his behalf. Manafort had been dodging Deripaska. The Russian oligarch wanted to know what had become of his money. Manafort had known Deripaska for years, so he surely understood the oligarch's history. Deripaska had won his fortune by prevailing in the so-called aluminum wars of the 1990s, a corpse-filled struggle, one of the most violent of all the competitions for dominance in a post-Soviet industry. In 2006, the U.S. State Department had revoked Deripaska's visa, reportedly out of concern over his ties to organized crime, which he has denied. Despite Deripaska's reputation, or perhaps because of it, Manafort had been dodging the oligarch's attempts to contact him. As Deripaska's lawyers informed a court in 2014 while attempting to claw back their client's money, it appears that Paul Manafort and Rick Gates have simply disappeared. 9 months after the Ukrainian Revolution, Manafort's family life also went into crisis. The nature of his home life can be observed in detail because Andrea's text messages were obtained last year by a hacktivist collective, most likely Ukrainians furious with Manafort's meddling in their country, which posted the purloined material on the dark web. The texts extend over 4 years, 2012-16, and 6 million words. Manafort has previously confirmed that his daughter's phone was hacked and acknowledged the authenticity of some texts quoted by Politico and The New York Times. Manafort and Andrea both declined to comment on this article. Jessica could not be reached for comment. Collectively, the texts show a sometimes fraught series of relationships, by turns loving and manipulative. Manafort was generous with his family financially. He'd invested millions in Jessica's film projects, and millions more in her now ex-husband's real estate ventures. But when he called home in tears or threatened suicide in the spring of 2015, he was pleading for his marriage. The previous November, as the cache of texts shows, his daughters had caught him in an affair with a woman more than 30 years his junior. It was an expensive relationship. According to the text messages, Manafort had rented his mistress a $9,000 a month apartment in Manhattan and a house in the Hamptons, not far from his own. He had handed her an American Express card, which she'd used to good effect. "I only go to luxury restaurants," she once declared on a friend's fledgling podcast, speaking expansively about her photo posts on social media: caviar, lobster, haute cuisine. The affair had been an unexpected revelation. Manafort had nursed his wife after a horseback riding accident had nearly killed her in 1997. I always marveled at how patient and devoted he was with her during that time," an old friend of Manafort's told me. But after the exposure of his infidelity, his wife had begun to confess simmering marital issues to her daughters. Manafort had committed to couples therapy, but, the texts reveal, that hadn't prevented him from continuing his affair. Because he clumsily obscured his infidelity and because his mistress posted about their travels on Instagram, his family caught him again, 6 months later. He entered the clinic in Arizona soon after, according to Andrea's texts. "My dad," she wrote, "is in the middle of a massive emotional breakdown.